Hey everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Developer Tea. In today's episode, I finished up my interview with Laurence Bradford. Laurence is the creator of Learn to Code with Me, but she does so much more than coding, and I found this out after interviewing her, how broad of a discussion we had about careers. So I really hope you tune in, even if you aren't a developer. Share this with the other people who you think could value learning a little bit about code, but also who are just kind of trying to find their way in their careers. I think that is who these episodes are going to be best suited for. So please share those with the people that you think would find them most valuable. Thank you so much for listening to the show. Let's get straight into the interview with Laurence Bradford. We've talked about quite a bit about careers now, and I want to talk to those people who are just like you, Laurence, and have you give them some direction, maybe. The kind of new developer who's interested in, for example, writing. I know you do quite a bit of writing. You're a contributor to Forbes, and that's still relatively active. You're active on Forbes. Can you kind of, first of all, talk a little bit about the process that you've gone through to develop your skill as a writer, and you know, how did you get the connection to Forbes and that kind of thing? And then also, you know, what is kind of your daily habitual routines for writing and uncovering insights that you may have that you feel like are worth sharing?
Yes, definitely. So for first, the skills as a writer. So that was definitely built up over time. Like learning anything or like doing anything. When I go back to older blog posts that I write, especially on like Learn to Code with Me, because like the Learn to Code with Me blog, or even some like guest posts I wrote on other sites in the past, I definitely cringe, but I think that's a good thing because it shows that you're progressing, right? Like when you look back at something you did even a few months ago, definitely a few years ago, right? And you're like, oh man. But actually, then that said, now when I look at writing that isn't too old, like even writing it's a year and a half ago, sometimes I look back, I'm like, oh wow, that was such a good article. Like, wow, I can't believe I wrote that like, you know, over a year ago, and it was so insightful. I almost wonder sometimes if I could even express myself in that way today. But I guess, you know, I'm going through different experiences now. But in any case, it was definitely practice. And one of the things that really helped me, and not everyone has the time or is ready enough to do this. But before I got my full-time job, I was writing quite a lot. So I was writing on a bunch of different sites. And at this point, it was all pretty much, I was being paid. So I wasn't, early on when I started to write on some other blogs, like it wasn't for compensation, but I've over time was able to start to make money through it. So I decided to hire like a copy editor because I would spend so much time like writing the posts and then editing them. And she was still in college at the time. Now she's not, but she would help me edit like different blog posts and she would give me feedback. And once I began kind of working with her and seeing like the changes she was making, and I'm really not that great at like grammar and stuff. I'm so much better now actually, but just from working with her, because fun fact, her and I still work together, but at my full-time job at Teachable. So I have her now.
That's cool.
Yeah, she helps. She's a contractor. She works like 35 hours a week, and she does a bunch of copy stuff here. But in any case, I was able to learn so much of that experience, and not just through working with her, because there were other times where I'd work with other editors. So I wrote a lot for Skill Crush. And there was always a lot of back and forth, like suggestions on how to make the articles better. So getting that feedback is really important as well. I think, as a writer, and really knowing how to, and not just getting that feedback from someone, but really like listening to it and, understanding it.
That's really, really very true.
Yes, because there's been maybe sometimes earlier on when I was a little more stubborn or something. I feel like I could have gotten feedback that I kind of brushed off a bit, but then once I got maybe it was partly part of maturity, and just becoming and just really understanding like, oh wow, wait a second, like these people definitely know what they're talking about, taking that feedback and really putting it into use. And now so I still have people guest post for my site, and I always give lots of feedback. I think some people maybe don't like it as much as others, but just trying to help. And so then with the other thing with Forbes, so as I mentioned, I began slowly writing for like more and more sites. and all the while like building connections in the community. So both like the tech community, but then also kind of like tangential ones. So with other people that wrote on the sites I was writing for instance, which weren't always totally tech related. Like for instance, Skill Crush has a lot of content on their blog about like freelancing and career stuff. So there were a few different writers. So in any case, someone that I had met through writing and we had become friends. He ended up giving me an introduction to an editor at Forbes. When I just kind of messaged him one day and told him I was looking for some more writing opportunities. And it was just that he knew that this Forbes editor was looking for new people. So it was kind of like it kind of just worked out.
Intersection.
Yeah, exactly. But that just also goes to show how important it is to like build like I feel like saying build connections and networking is so like salesy. I think of it. I think of it as more as like friends and like your community and like the people you have around you. And that ties back into my editor. Her name is Kate, by the way. It ties back into Kate because even though she, I was paying her and, now she works with me at my full-time job and we're still paying her. It was still intentionally surrounding myself with people that would, kind of help me hone my craft in one way or another. Yeah. So, and then you also asked me about my routine. Okay. So my routine right now is pretty crazy, just because between the full-time job and everything else going on, I pretty much work whenever I can squeeze it in. And when I say work right now, I really mean on like Forbes stuff and, my podcast and anything else that's unrelated to my full-time job. So in the mornings, in the evenings, which is right now we're doing this interview at night. And also on the weekends when I can. I try to take one full day off a week. It's usually Saturday. And generally I pretty much do nothing. Like I don't even leave the house. Like this past Saturday, I didn't even leave the house. I left the house once on Sunday. I don't know. I was especially drained for some reason this weekend, but I really need that time where I just don't do anything and completely unwind.
Yeah. I'm the same way. As I said, I've been doing some research into millennial mindset and that kind of stuff. And part of that was just self-research and doing like personality tests and that kind of thing. And as cheesy as it is, which I feel like the same thing with the sales language, to say like personality test, it sounds very HR speaky. But these things are actually kind of amazing. If they nail your personality right, they really get it right. And they can be really insightful. And they're not going to be 100% right, but there has been a lot of study into psychology, and one of the things that keeps on coming up is my introverted nature and how I express that introverted nature. One of those things is that I absolutely cannot stand big parties, and it's just a part of my personality. I always want like an escape plan to get out of big parties, which is really hilarious. There's actually an episode of The Office where Jim, and this is way off topic, but Jim on The Office, he's constantly trying to leave this party that Robert California, it's in one of the later seasons, post-Michael season, for those of you who are Office fans, but he's trying to leave the party, and he's constantly looking for an escape, and he can't ever find one, and I identify with that 110%. It's so funny. How our different personalities express themselves, but we still, even with this introverted personality, I do have a point here. Even with an introverted personality, maintaining and developing relationships isn't really an option. I can't just opt out of that just because I'm an introvert. I have to find ways that make sense with my personality to develop those deeper relationships and continuously, cultivate my network.
Yeah, I'm actually a huge fan of The Office. I know exactly what episode you're talking about. That's funny. So for me, it's a little different because big parties are like, in New York, there's not a ton of parties, at least like the way I would go back to when I was living in Pennsylvania, because we don't have a lot of space, right? So if like you have an apartment, it's like hard to have a big party, but like going to crowded areas, because there's definitely crowded areas here in New York, it doesn't bother me so much. But it's, for me, I get more uncomfortable around like groups of like, I don't know, like it's so situational for me, because sometimes I feel like I could be a lot more comfortable in a big group of people who I don't know who anyone is versus in like a group of 10 where I do know everyone. I don't know. It just depends on the environment and what's going on. But yeah, no, everyone's different, especially, and I do consider myself introvert. I've taken some of these personalities too. In certain ways, I'm introverted. In certain ways, I'm definitely not. But then,
Sure.
as I just with the example, like needing the time to basically not leave the house over the week, or I just completely veg out. I have other friends who I would say are very, very extroverted. That would be like hell to them, like just staying inside all day. Like they need to go out, need to be around people, need to be doing things. Actually, my mother is like this. Like my mother goes crazy when she's inside for too long. But I love, like, especially on the weekends, just to what's that word? I don't know. Like we'll veg out or just decompress, just totally decompress.
Yeah. You recharge on the weekend. Yeah.
Yes. It's like I need at least one day a week where I'm pretty much not like that. I don't have any responsibilities. I don't check email. I just like sit on the couch, or maybe I do leave, but nothing too ambitious.
It's actually very funny that I have this in common with you. Definitely have a day or 2 days, and even actually every day at night for, at least 10 to 20 minutes, I need to do something that's relatively decompression style, right? Like something totally not valuable to anyone but me. Right now, my current kind of crutch, I have the mobile version. If anybody follows me on Twitter, you know this, the mobile version of Roller Coaster Tycoon. And I've been playing it far too much at night, just late at night. I'll play it for like 20 minutes and I get that decompression time where I'm not having to give anybody attention. I'm not having to, try to like do the right thing or, entertain anyone. It's just doing nothing. It's just kind of being, it's almost like meditation in a way.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely TV shows for sure. I love TV shows, and it's because I know some people like will love to like read books at night, but for me and just my personality, if I start to read like a really interesting book,
I fall asleep.
No, actually, like if it was really boring, I would fall asleep. But certain kinds of like books or even podcasts, I had to like slow down listening to podcasts because I would get so like energized. Like, so I would listen to like business podcasts.
Oh, that's funny.
Or I would listen to like ones that would get me really like, all of a sudden I'm like taking notes. I'm like doing research online. Yeah. I'm like planning some like huge project or something. Like it's not like, it would almost be the opposite of relaxing, but not like in an exciting way, not like a stressful way, but it's like, okay, like I just need to do something mindless. And for me, that's like the television. I can just like books or podcasts are too like engaging for me. Like I need the mindless, just like watch a funny TV show or even like a drama kind of TV show, like, House of Cards or something like that. And get really engaged in the story and just like forget about my real life.
Yeah, no, this is, I mean, there is actually, a lot of people who are listening to this right now are probably, why are we talking about TV? The truth is, if you were to ask like a selection of 5 very successful individuals, what they do to prepare for a week, for example, or like what do you do on the weekends? You're going to see a pretty large number of them say, I have some time where I am totally 100% resting. And it's kind of like a principle, right? We're built to rest a significant portion of our lives. We're supposed to rest. And if you don't, you're going to burn out. Like it's going to be really bad news for your mental state and for your physical state if you don't rest.
Yeah, definitely. I remember hearing one time, like Tony Robbins, I don't know where he's interviewed, I think on a podcast. Someone's asking him this, like what he does at night and what he reads and stuff. And he said exactly the same thing I kind of just said. He was like, I don't read at night. Like I can't, it doesn't not help me fall asleep. I have to watch like a completely mindless show, like Family Guy or some other, like, I don't think he said South Park. I think he said Family Guy, but something like to that end where it's just like kind of like turns my brain off. And once I heard him say that, it made me feel a lot better about like watching TV at night. Cause I like pretty much have to watch TV at night.
See, we're going right back to this discussion on guilt and shame. Like we have this built-in, constantly hustling perspective, and you have to reject that to ever even rest. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. But as you said before, if your brain, you're always going, you're definitely going to burn out at some point. You need something, maybe it is reading for another person or listening to podcasts for someone else. But yeah, just whatever it is for you, you have to do that.
I've heard, a pretty large cross. Very few people would fault you for reading fiction. This is this is kind of like the academics' good, stay in the good graces of the academics. You can read fiction and be mindless with that if you feel too convicted about watching TV at night for whatever reason. So yeah, absolutely. Rest is so important. So this is good. Really interesting kind of way to decompose, the way that different people that are, in this industry who are creating media and learning all different kinds of tech information, and you're really passionate about learning specifically, but also, I think you are kind of the picture of the digital entrepreneurial age of there's so many possibilities, so many things available just at our fingertips. There's just this whole world of products that are yet to be made, and they're all in our hands to make. And it's a really exciting time to be a professional in the professional sphere. And I'm really thankful that you've been able to share some of that with us today.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much again for having me on. And it was a wonderful conversation. And yeah, I totally agree that it's a very exciting time to be a professional. I'm so happy that, I chose to get into tech, and, here I am several years later, and I'm very excited also to see where the future leads with, not just my own career, but with everything else going around in the, in tech in general.
The world around us is incredibly noisy, isn't it? We get messages all the time from various media sources, from all of our interactions in our day-to-day life. Our phone is buzzing, and we can't seem to find a quiet space. And the incredible thing is, we really actually need a quiet space. We need the chance for our minds to sit in silence, or at the very least, sit in contemplation, in a quiet, mindful state. And that's exactly what it means to meditate. And if you've never tried meditation before, I highly recommend that you try it out. And the way that I would recommend that you try it out is using Headspace. Headspace is today's sponsor. Headspace is focused on mental health, and meditation has been shown to be an effective way to improve your mental health. And this isn't just for people who believe a particular set of beliefs. This is for everyone. Meditation is for everyone. So go and check out Headspace. It's really a very well done application. I've used it quite a few times. Now, on top of this, Headspace is growing. They're growing very fast. They have over 10 million downloads worldwide, and they are building their engineering teams up in San Francisco and in LA. So if you are interested in joining a company that's working to improve the health and happiness of the world, then you should apply. Head over to headspace.com/join-us. Headspace.com/join-us. And of course, you can go to spec.fm/headspace to learn more about the application. Really highly recommend that you guys check this out if you never have done meditation, or if you've done it in the past and you stopped because maybe some of the videos or the audio that you were using felt boring or cheesy. Headspace is the opposite of those things. So go check it out. Once again, spec.fm/headspace. And if you're interested in joining their team, headspace.com/join-us. Thank you again to Headspace for sponsoring today's episode of Developer Tea. So I have 3 questions. 2 of them I ask all of my guests. One of them I'm only asking you, and I might adopt this for other guests. The first one is, do you have any recommendations for books, podcasts, blogs, TV shows, as you mentioned, or any other kind of resources that you have been enjoying, regardless of why you've been enjoying it, but things that you've been kind of reading or looking over recently that you really appreciate and think other people would appreciate as well?
Okay, so first with TV, oh my gosh. Well, I have so many favorite TV shows that like span a range of categories, I guess you could say. If you haven't watched Westworld yet and you're into anything that's like kind of dramatic, or it's sort of sci-fi, and I'm not really one to be into sci-fi at all. I really didn't think I was going to like it, but I kept hearing people talk about it. Westworld is like probably the best show I've watched in a really long time. I think it's like it had me thinking for days. So that's one, not like a helpful for your career, but just a really interesting, if you want to completely like leave reality and do something that's like mindless or get engaged in something else aside from work, Westworld is a great outlet for that. Aside from that, something that I've been doing or a certain resource I've been using is actually lynda.com, because they have this whole course library and tons and thousands of courses. And I've been kind of wanting to build up my knowledge in a few other areas of my company. So for instance, I work across departments or teams at my company. So I work a lot with like engineering. I also work a lot with customer care and also like marketing. But one area I really don't know much about is customer care. So I began taking like a sort of like intro to customer support and other kind of courses that relate to that, as well as some stuff on like usability testing, because I want to do some usability testing here at work. But I'm just mentioning Lynda because I feel like it has so many good like business kind of skills and things that, of course, I love like Team Treehouse and Code School and these other more coding specific online resources. But with Lynda, you can get a whole range of things. So I've been doing some of that stuff recently. So that's like the resources.
Yeah, great. So going back to Westworld real quick, because first of all, I could almost do an entire podcast, not just an episode, but a whole other podcast about the show. We enjoyed it immensely. My wife and I watched Westworld pretty much like in a week or so.
Yeah.
Over Christmas time, the winter break time, and it was challenging and it was really high, like very well done. If you're a fan of Westerns, by the way, the Western scenes in Westworld, there are Western scenes, believe it or not, but they have done a very good job in like retaining some of the common idioms of the old Westerns. So like having a really strong and mysterious black hat character, it's very well retained. And if you were to watch just one Western scene, you would feel like you were watching a Western. It's very well done from that perspective. But on the flip side, I would say actually for developers that Westworld could be good for your career because it actually asks a lot of the classic questions about AI, believe it or not. So like, questions about consciousness, and I don't want to give anything away, but questions about consciousness, questions about, I think everybody knows that there's some artificial intelligence type stuff in this show, but questions about what it means to be ethical with conscious, artificial intelligence and that kind of stuff. Very, very interesting. Certainly an adult show. So
yeah, definitely.
Just kind of a word of caution: don't watch it around your child if they're not accustomed to that kind of content. But very, very good in my opinion. Totally agree with that. Okay, so the second question is one of the questions I ask all of the guests that come on the show. If you had 30 seconds to give advice to all developers of all experience levels, what would you say to them?
Oh man, that's a tricky question just because you said all levels of developers. Okay, so I would have to say, and I don't want to be salesy again, but like building a community or building your networking is probably the most important thing, at least for me in like my career. And I don't just mean like my full-time job. I mean through Forbes and the blog and the podcast and everything else. Investing in like relationship building has been like, it's been like light and day. It's totally changed the trajectory of so much that I have done up until this point. And I feel like that can be applicable to anyone in their career, whether they're new or whether they're, more senior, or even if they already have a huge community, just continuing to nurture that.
Are there any resources? Because as a developer who's listening to this and hearing this information, I hear this from other people. My question would be, what do I do today that can help me with my relationships? Like, what is the actionable, an easy step, or maybe not easy, but like an actionable thing that I can say, hey, this is something I can work on as a developer who wants to develop new relationships. I may have all of the desire, but can you give me kind of a pointer in how I can better develop relationships with my coworkers?
Yeah, so I first think it totally depends on like who you are and like and what you enjoy. So for instance, I actually don't enjoy like networking events that much. I much more enjoy one-on-one, like getting coffee, grabbing a drink after work, something like that with the person. I'm just a lot more comfortable. So something that I've done and um that has worked so well is actually starting my podcast. And then, mind you, I live in New York City, so there a lot of people live here. So I do have that as a huge advantage. And there has been multiple people that I've had on my show, or I've somehow connected through my podcast, or maybe through Forbes or something else, not always the podcast. But it was kind of like an online connection, seeing that we both lived in New York. And then I would be the one to say, hey, like maybe we should, grab coffee sometime or a drink after work or, dinner, whatever, whatever feels right. Kind of depends on like, the person and what they do and whatnot. So I would say as far as like actionable advice goes, like looking for people in your area. If you're anything like me who doesn't like those big networking events, like finding someone maybe through like their blog or podcast or even like a Facebook group. There's actually been people that I've met through other Facebook groups. There's one that I'm in called Tech Ladies. And I remember there's been more than one person that I sort of connected with through the Facebook group, ended up talking like through email. And then maybe had them on my podcast or interviewed them for a Forbes article or whatever. And then went out and met them and then in real life and then continued to nurture that relationship after that. So I guess like for me, it's starting online and then bringing that online, like offline, the relationship that was online, offline.
It's very interesting. It's kind of the reason, if you look at the average person, they probably are working with either an extension of a relationship from their, particularly for people who have who went to college, they're probably working with an extension of or with a direct relationship with someone that they had in college. And part of the reason for this is because we didn't really have much of a choice in our education, especially for those who do go to college. You don't have much of a choice but to work with and alongside other people. You're kind of put into a community of people that nearly has to talk, right? A lot of times, if you live in a dorm, you're assigned a roommate. If you have any number of classes, and pretty much across the board, you're going to have group assignments. You're going to be relying on other people all the time in that kind of environment. This is one of the values that that having a in-person education might provide. Just a side note, but it's very important that we recognize the value of this person-to-person interaction. Basically, all you're saying, Laurence, is that you continue to make new friends. And it's not just friends, it's a more complex relationship than that, but you're continuing to connect with other people on some personal level. That's really the key word that I see jumping out. The theme is be personal with other people.
Yeah, definitely. And I do try to think of it as, friends. I think if you only have the mindset where you're just meeting people for like business opportunities or career opportunities, it's
easy to detect,
yes,
right?
yes, definitely. And I also, just as I guess like another thing, I always also tell people who, especially those who say that they're struggling to figure out like how they can go about this, to provide value first. And then I always hear, oh, but I'm like new in my career. I just graduated college. Like I don't have anything to provide. And I know I felt that way early on, but then as I kind of grew, there's so many ways you could provide value without like being an expert. And that could maybe be, for instance, giving feedback on like a product. So say if you met with someone who was like a co-founder or whatever, CEO, giving feedback on their idea, right? Like you don't have to be super experienced to do that. And you could give really helpful insights, especially if you put time and thought into it. Another thing, and this is what I try to do all the time now, is connect people I know. So say I know someone, two people that I think could really like benefit from knowing one another, I'll introduce them to each other, which is giving value, right? Especially if, I ask them first and everything to make sure it's okay to do the intro, But that's another way to give value. That doesn't mean, you have to be an expert or something on any topic. And there's even more ways like beyond that to help someone out.
Yeah, everybody has value to give. And if you feel like you don't have value to offer, that is I would say, kind of a modified form of imposter syndrome. Like, I felt this way actually personally when I've gone to conferences, because it's a little bit easier for me to sit behind a mic and talk, and this goes out to thousands of people, and it doesn't really hit me when I go to a conference that a lot of those people may have listened to the show, or that I now have an opportunity, like a lead in, and say, hey, I'm the host of Developer Tea, and that gives me a chance to have a discussion with a bunch of people. I still have this kind of social anxiety when I show up at a conference of people that I'm not sure that I feel confident just walking up and talking to them, right? And this is just an imposter. I feel like an imposter at those conferences sometimes, because I feel like I'm the new guy and they've all been around since the internet was created, right? But that's usually not true. It's usually not true that you are the new guy or the new girl. And it's also usually not true that you have nothing to provide. And a lot of other people are standing around looking at you as if they are the imposter and you're the one that's been there since the beginning of the internet. And you have plenty of space to walk up to each other and just share that vulnerability, right? That's what creates relationships.
Yeah, 100%.
So the last question, and this will wrap up the interview today, but the last question that I like to ask every guest that comes on the show: what do you wish more people would talk to you about?
That's a really good one. What do I wish more people would talk to me about? Oh man. So I assume you just mean, you mean in general. Like I can kind of take this. When you say people, I mean, I can think of it either at work or outside of work or something.
Yeah, it's totally open.
Totally open-ended, yeah. Okay. I don't know if this is like a cop-out or something, but I feel like at work, like at my full-time job, and even just for reference, it's like a fast-moving startup. I guess it's just also my personality. I love to have like feedback and stuff. I wish I was given more feedback at work. So what I mean by that is I wish like there was more communication around like ways I could do my job better, and not just from like my boss. I mean, like from everyone that I work with, like peers, like, almost like constructive criticism or something, right? Like saying, oh, like if you would do this would make my life easier. And then, well, it would also make my life easier because I would know how to make their life easier.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So just more constructive feedback from people.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking in like the frame of like my full-time job, not, outside of that. But yeah, so, and, as I'm actually in my office now, well, at another part of my office recording the interview. So I guess it's very top of mind for me right now. But, yeah, I think, and I think having that kind of feedback is so important. I always try. So I do have people who work for me as well here. And I always try to, I guess maybe I guess it depends on managing. I'm a little hands-on, maybe you could say. And I definitely love to give like a lot of feedback and have people ask me questions and, answer their questions. But yeah, I wish I had some more of that, I guess, at this moment in my job, that where I was getting the feedback.
Yeah. And it's important to, like, especially for those of us who have other people working kind of under our lead, it's important for us to propagate this as kind of a system, right? Like one thing that I do with the developers at Whiteboard, it's kind of a weird thing that we do, but every week we have this kind of a check-in meeting. And, we do other meetings that are more focused on specific work that we are, actively engaged in. We have, our daily kind of stand-up type meetings. But we have this meeting where we kind of all the developers come into a room and we sit down and we throw out how we are doing. And what I've enforced is that we have to objectify it, right? Because it's easy to assume that somebody who says, "Oh, I'm doing okay," that they're doing really terrible, right? When really what they meant by okay is, I'm actually doing very well. So we have this very simple rating system, 1 to 10. How are you doing? And what it has created, we don't record it. We don't do any of that. We just have created a space that says somebody on our team is not doing super well, or somebody's like really frustrated about this project. Now we have the opportunity to ask, how are we going to fix it? Right? Like, how can we do this thing better? And it has created a really interesting space for feedback, because it's almost like a reactionary feedback rather than a proactive feedback. But it has worked quite well, I would say, in getting us to communicate better with each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, it really does just all kind of come back down to like communication at the end of the day, right? But yeah, I think especially when things are moving quickly, and that could be at any sized company. It can be hard to make time. And that said, and now I'm like, it's also, I think, the responsibility of someone, so like me in this instance, to ask for feedback. It's like a two-way street, right? So having, whether it's a manager or a coworker, a peer, be express like if how you can help make their lives easier, or whatever that may be. And then at the same time, though, asking for that feedback. So maybe tomorrow I'll add that to like my to-do list and my calendar. I'll take time to specifically ask people how I could, improve certain things that I'm doing.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned you're going to take time and actually put it on your calendar. This idea of like distilling these ideals or these plans into actions. That's really what I want people who are listening to this episode. If you didn't do that, go back and re-listen to some of this stuff and write down, actionable ways that you can act on the information that you're getting. Otherwise, a lot of the content that we take in on the internet, we read it and it impacts us on some emotional or energetic level. And then we turn around, and it's actually funny you mentioned this earlier, that when you're listening to podcasts, you have a hard time not doing this, but we turn around and we don't have anything tangible to actually do with that information or with that energy. Instead, we've failed to make a system that supports our newfound knowledge. So definitely a good last little bit of information, or a cool tip that you accidentally gave everyone just now.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to say is, if it's not in my calendar, it doesn't exist. So I will use my calendar to just give myself little reminders for like later in the week or something, or even like months in advance sometimes. But of course, I get to the day sometimes, especially if it's months in advance, and I realize whatever the reminder was is like no longer relevant. But I think just the act of writing something down, or for me, typing something down is great. It really helps you, like, it just instills it in your mind.
I could talk about that for a long time, but we're going to wrap up this interview instead. So thank you so much again, Laurence, for coming on the show. I know it's a little ways off, but the next season of your podcast is coming out. I believe it's next month, you said, correct?
It's March 28th. Yes, that's the tentative launch date of season 3 of the show.
That's fantastic. So everyone go and subscribe. I assume that if they subscribe to the existing feed, that they'll be updated whenever the new one comes out.
Yes, yes, of course. Okay, you can find it on learntocodewith.me/podcast. Or if you are listening on iTunes, you can find it at learntocodewith.me/iTunes.
Oh, very cool. All right. Well, go and subscribe and check out the great stuff. There's also, I'm assuming there's an RSS feed on your blog and all of those wonderful things.
Yes.
So we will include show notes, of course, to all of these great resources that Laurence has created. Thank you again for your time tonight, and thank you for coming on the show and sharing with the audience, Laurence.
Yep. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Developer Tea. Thank you to today's awesome sponsor, Headspace. If you are not trying out meditation yet, and you're looking for a way to level up in your career, but you're not really sure where to look, one of the best ways to learn how to focus, how to practice how to focus, is Headspace. Go and check out what Headspace has to offer to you. Oh, and by the way, don't forget Headspace is hiring. So if you are looking for an opportunity to work at a company that cares about mental health above everything else, then go and check out what Headspace has to offer in terms of jobs. You can find out more about the jobs that Headspace has at headspace.com/join-us. That's headspace.com/join-us. Thank you again for listening to today's episode of Developer Tea, and until next time, enjoy your tea.